the number of hours they study per week. Okay. Does studying affect your GPA? How many hours a week does a student work? Yeah. We're going to think that students who maybe are full-time and are working 40 hours plus are going to have a harder time maybe keeping up than a student who works a 10-hour week. Okay. So maybe something with work hours. Now maybe there's also, and there's actually been some studies that say that students who do work a little bit during the school year do better than students who don't work at all. The student who works like 10 hours a week seem to do better than students who work no hours per week. So maybe you could look for that. What other things do you think would affect GPA?
How many classes they're taking?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe credits taken per semester. If you're only taking one course, hypothetically, maybe you could do better because you just have one thing to focus on than taking 5 or 6 courses. So maybe.
Major.
Okay. I'll put down major, but I'll come back to that in just a minute.
Whether they live at home or on campus.
Okay. Other ideas?
Average amount of sleep per night.
Okay. Other things? Come on, your students. Why do you think you do better or worse than other students? You're not all homogenous.
Amount of time spent partying.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that. Something about social activities. So, yeah. And along with that, maybe something like the number of drinks you have per week, or you could ask a question, maybe how many nights a week do you go out and drink, or something like that. So, I mean, you could do something. Now, granted, we're assuming everyone's over 21 for that question, but yeah, so you could ask, that would be a good question. That could affect a student. Anything else?
How much they go to class?
Yes. Maybe something about how many classes do you skip on average, or, yeah. So something about how attendance at class. So, yeah, I'd agree with that. Anything else? There are a few things you aren't thinking of, but maybe it's because you're not as involved in those things. athletes. Do student athletes do better or worse? And that could even be a question of, do they do better or worse if they're in season or not? Yeah, so a baseball player or someone like that in the spring might not do as well as a baseball player does in the fall when they're not in season, not having to travel for their sport. So that could be one thing.
It's a, you're paying for it. You're paying. Somebody
Okay,
will
yeah.
pay for their own school trial or maybe so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, that could. I mean, certainly if you're paying for your own education, that may give you a little bit more incentive to do better than if you're, you know, having mommy and daddy pay for it or something like that. So yeah, I mean, that certainly could be. And with all of these ideas, we don't know how much of an effect they have or if they even have an effect. But we could ask, if we collect data, do we find that relationship? Along with athletes, I know this is super big here at Towson, but at some schools, sororities and fraternities, sort of the idea of Greek life. I mean, that kind of goes into social activity too, but you know, you could separate that out, especially at a bigger school, you could look at that. Anything else? It's a pretty good list. But what you would want to think about is you would want to start off with this idea of what things affect a college student's GPA. Okay? So for your project, what you want to come up with is you're going to try to predict or understand something. So you could say, I'm going to do a college student's GPA. And then you'd want to think about all the things that you think might affect it. Okay? Now, you mentioned major. And major is a good idea in terms of, certainly there are some majors that are easier than other majors, or maybe if you want to think about some majors that are harder than other majors. So if you're a biology major, that's probably a little bit harder than marketing. So you could ask that, and that's not a bad idea. The question then will become, and this is something on your project that you'd want to think about, is in the end you have to have all numbers. Okay? To do a regression, to do this project, every question that you ask has to get a numerical value at some point. So some questions are easy. What's your GPA? That's a number. What was your high school GPA? That's a number. Study hours, work hours, credits taken. All of those are numbers. On or off campus. Now, if you're going on or off campus, that's a yes-no question. It is, but one thing we can do with yes-no questions is we can give them values of 0 and 1. So we can either say that characteristic is on and give it a value of 1, or give it a value of 0 and say that it's off. So if I ask you, do you live on campus? Okay. For students who live on campus, I give them a value of 1. For students who live off campus, I give them a value of 0. And I've turned it into a numeric answer. Okay. So that would be easy enough to do. Sleep hours, social activities, I could ask, as I said, a question like, how many nights a week do you go out and drink? I could ask a question about how many drinks you have per week. Again, I'm getting numeric answers to that. Classes skipped, that's a number. Athletes, I could ask, are you a student athlete? And again, that goes into the yes-no category, which I could make values for. Are you paying for your education? You can do that. Are you a member of a Greek organization on campus? Again, I could make that into a number. So what you're going to want to do is think about questions like that. This is one type of project that I like to call. And this is the, basically, the student survey project. You go out, you form a question